So this is a really special episode. I want to welcome my good friend Tim Logsdon from Buffalo, New York. Tim has a terrific background on a super important topic. He's an addiction and mental health counselor and serves his community, serves people who are struggling with substance use. And as we all know, in the emergency services profession, this is part of the culture when we're talking about alcohol in particular. So I want to welcome Tim, and hopefully we're going to dispel some of the myths and some of the stigma around. Yeah.
Good to see you, Mike. Good to see you.
Thank you. So Tim, can you share a little bit about your background and what brought you to this line of work?
Sure. I started right out of college working in the mental health field. Was lucky to get a really good job and working in case management. Case management is where we go out into the community, help folks that are at need with sometimes really simple tasks, like just getting to appointments, encouraging them to get there, helping with laundry, cleaning out their house, like pretty much everything. You name it, we did whatever we could do to help. I did that for a while, and then I turned more of my focus over to the addiction work a little bit later in my career. I was, again, very fortunate to work at some hospitals. I did both inpatient and outpatient work on units, and still have some contracts with local hospitals here. And mostly right now I'm in private practice, and my private practice does focus on issues related to alcohol or drugs or other addictions related to things like food addictions, work addiction, gambling, and sex. You know, all these things that we don't really think about normally as things that can be problematic, but it does run the gamut. It really does.
Oh, that's interesting. And I just want to share with everybody that we will include links and contact information to Tim so that people can reach out and follow up with you. It's good to know you're out there. One of the things that I was thinking about is how prevalent, substance use is, as a society. And then also, we've got the pandemic, people are isolating, they're dealing with a lot of stress. Do you see that on your end in your practice?
Yeah, it really is a timely thing to talk about this now with COVID, with the pandemic, with the shutdowns, with all of this. We are seeing, probably most people know this, there's a big uptick in problems related to emotions and drinking. Opiate overdoses, of course, have been a problem now for many years, but they've only gotten worse through this pandemic. So we've kind of taken like everybody's stress and it's hit us all. It doesn't matter who you are, but it's hit pretty much everybody, and it's hit us hard in some predictable ways. You said a buzzword for me, Mike, talking about culture. And we are brought up in this country really celebrating alcohol. It is something that we look forward to. It's not only seen just as neutral, but it's seen as a reward. It is a rite of passage when we are children turning into adults. We can't wait until we're big enough to drink and to be like the big people and be like the adults, be like mom, dad, whatever. But it is celebrated anytime you watch our movies, our television, sports arenas. You go to the game. Hey, we're going to get together, watch the Buffalo Sabres for us here, although they're not doing so well recently. We love our hockey. We love our football. And if you're going to get together with friends, it's expected that you're going to drink. It's just it's so woven into our culture, and it is everywhere. I was actually talking with a gentleman yesterday who's a bit older than me. I'm in my 50s, but he had a couple years on me, and he was really struggling with drinking. And it's something that hadn't got him his whole life. He had led a great life, but as he turned into more of the senior years, alcohol started to creep up on him. And now that he's working to try to put that down, it's really hard because it's everywhere. And he was talking about it. I can't even go to the grocery store. I can't drive down the street. There's a liquor store there. I can't turn the TV on, and they're pouring their drinks, and it's just everywhere. And I hear this theme again and again. But you're right. With the pandemic, it's only made things worse.
Gosh, I didn't think about how pervasive it is in terms of just the sights that you see. You go to the grocery store, there it is. It's on the billboards, it's in the commercials, and I can so relate to the sports piece of it as well. I mean, when we go to a hockey game or a football game, that's usually part of the experience, and it's very normalized, I feel like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it, we do separate out this idea that alcohol is almost like good for you because it's a reward. I can't wait to Friday to have a drink. I'm really stressed. I got to have a drink. I got to pour something. I got to do this. And then we see that as like almost a different category than other drugs because from a chemical perspective, alcohol goes into our body. It travels up to our brain and it affects our brain, but we only have one brain and we only have one pleasure center. And this pleasure center is affected by neurotransmitters like dopamine. It spreads it out throughout the brain. And in some ways, the brain doesn't care if it's alcohol or cocaine or heroin or the slot machines. It's the same dopamine that gets translated up here that feels good. So we do categorize alcohol as it's good, it's safe, it's what everybody does. It's just part of our culture. We have these, catchphrases like if you're old enough to serve your country, you're old enough to have a drink. We have that. It is just kind of woven into our culture.
That makes a lot of sense. Um, in the fire service and EMS and law enforcement, there's also, alcohol is kind of a tradition.
Mhm.
It's also a rite of passage. When you first come on the job, you want to fit in with everybody. And one of the best places to do that is, like you said, at the end of your tour of duty or your shift or whatever, you go out with everybody um, and get to know each other. And usually alcohol is a part of that. Where I think it starts to be troublesome is when, our sleep schedules are really tenuous,
Yeah.
tend to work long shifts, get really amped up due to adrenaline and things that we see. And then you come home, you can't just go to bed. Like, if you're doing CPR on somebody or you just went to a house fire or car wreck or whatever that is, coming home, I, I've been there. Like, you lay in bed wide awake and you've got to get up in just a little while and go back to work.
Yeah.
And so you know that's one of the challenges, and I'm wondering if you see that in your practice as well, sleep issues.
Sleep issues are really big. There's this, there's just so much good and bad. There's the mix of both
Right.
where alcohol can sedate us, it relaxes us, it can be really effective of knocking us out. But then there's that equal and opposite reaction where, it's good, 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 good. But then a few hours later, it becomes bad because it interrupts the normal alpha, beta, theta waves, the delta waves, all the waves of our brain that are there to do what they're supposed to do. And although it's a nice kickstart, it's really good and effective, but then it has that opposite reaction where it's literally detoxing from our body. Even if it's, we're not normal drinkers, we don't drink a lot, we don't drink often, it still can have these negative effects. And these are the ones that we don't talk about so much in society. These are the ones that are, and this is a good part, I think, for us to talk about today, is language, where alcohol is good, alcohol is good, alcohol is good is a kind of a subliminal message that's given to us. But there is not so much of that message of alcohol can have these bad sides. So the only thing that we really equate with alcohol being bad is if you're an alcoholic. And that to me is like fingers, the fingernails on the chalkboard, because that term alcoholic is so misunderstood. It is so misunderstood. I use this is terrible. I got to get a better prop, but this is my pool thermometer, to be honest with you. But this is how we want to look at alcohol, and we want to look at whether it's problematic or not. When we use the word alcoholic, we immediately conjure up the 99th percentile, the very top of the thermometer. And we think of things like the guy who is homeless, he's underneath the bridge, he has the brown paper bag, and he has such an odor you can't even approach the guy. And so we think, well, geez, I'm drinking and my wife is angry at me for drinking all the time. My kids are fighting with me because of drinking, but I'm not an alcoholic because I dress nicely. I'm clean shaven. I go to work every day. I've never been arrested for anything. I don't break the law. So therefore, I'm not an alcoholic. Again, that word is so skewed to this little piece. Um,
Yeah.
so what I would just encourage our listeners to consider is throwing that word out completely. And what's a better thing to think of is this thing, the idea of the continuum, where yes, there are what 1-2% of our population that are like that are just completely dysfunctional. Maybe if it's even higher than that. However, that means that the other 97, 96% look just like you and me. You know, we're responsible adults. We go to work. We take care of things, particularly at the bottom of this thermometer, where we can have a mild problem and seemingly be average Joes. You know, we're okay. You know, we're like you say. You know, maybe I drink a little bit to put myself to sleep, and it knocks me out. But then I'm tired the next day. I'm groggy, and then I do that as a pattern over and over again. But hey, I'm not robbing any banks. I'm not hurting anybody. I'm doing my job. I'm proud of who I am, but I still might have that mild disorder, if you will.
That was a great visual, Tim. I appreciate that. I think that's something that will stick with everybody. And such an important piece of this. You're right. People think about a almost like a caricature of what
Yeah.
an alcoholic is supposed to look like. And if you don't fit that, well, then you don't have a problem or you're not struggling with it. And so for everybody watching, I hope they got that message loud and clear. Um, I know a lot of people who are challenged and dealing with this, and it's really hard. It's really hard when you're not sleeping well. It's really hard in emergency services when you don't have time to really process the last call that you were on, and the next call is already here. And so those things stack up, and you feel like you're dealing with it just fine, um, but then you're really not a lot of times. Uh, I can remember times where I would have those startle awake moments,
Mhm.
and jump out of bed, and
Absolutely.
yeah, and so you and I talked about a really kind of a dysfunctional approach to that many of us do, myself included, is we have this thing called a coma cocktail. And it's kind of like a homemade concoction that when you're having trouble sleeping after a couple of long shifts, you start mixing things together and getting creative, like Benadryl and alcohol, and I don't want to name them all, but um, that can start you on a really dangerous path.
Mhm.
And we joke about it in the firehouse. Everybody's got their version of the coma cocktail,
Mhm.
uh, but really you're like one slip up away from actually going into a coma.
Mhm.
And also we celebrate, we do things as a group, and drinking is usually a part of that. And I was thinking about how we go out together and do everything together. It becomes almost incestuous. It's a really close knit family, and we, as a result, look out for each other, and that can include, I hate to say it, but enabling each other a bit too.
Mhm.
um,
That's a big part of my work, Mike, is I work a lot with family members, and the things that you hear from family members where see, this is a part, again, the negatives that we don't talk about with alcohol or other substances is that we lose that ability to really see ourselves clearly. So I was talking with a couple recently, and And I said, what brought you guys in here? And the gentleman said, well, my wife just doesn't understand me. She just doesn't get what I'm trying to say to her. So we get into arguments. But it was clear after just maybe 10 minutes that the gentleman just talked in circles. And I'd say, well, give me an example and let's talk. Let's see what's going on with your wife and how we can kind of fix her. But it was really clear that he couldn't even put together a comprehensive sentence. And this is what alcohol can do to us. It's that old, God, I don't know who put this up. It sounds so morbid, but it's that frog that is on the stove. And
Yes.
right, if a frog jumps into the boiling water, he'll jump right back out again because he doesn't want to die. But if you put the frog in there and slowly turn on the heat, he will slowly be cooked. I don't know who
Yes.
invented that, but geez, but there's a truth to that for sure, that alcohol
Yeah.
can do that to us, that it can slowly start to take away our ability to have this insight. And then we have these poor decisions and theories, if you will, that are really off base, but we just can't see it. I like to use the analogy here of you buy a brand new car, beautiful Cadillac, smells great, all the bells and whistles, sunroof, wonderful engine, purrs like a kitten. You drive it off the lot, you come up to the first stop sign and you go right through it because there's no brakes. Like the brakes are just totally broken. Now the rest of the car is perfect. Everything is great, but there's no brakes. That certainly is understandable and it can happen. Alcohol is kind of that same way where the alcohol can attack our decision-making part of our brain, but the rest of us functions very normally. So there's really nothing wrong with us except for one area where we make poor decisions. So then as we assess and we look inside to say, well, it's not me, it's her. Why does she always yell at me? Why is she always on my back? Why is mom always worried about me? Why is dad always worried about me? It's their problem, not mine. They call that the blame game in my business, where the person who is drinking regularly will blame everybody else around them for their problems. So I got a little bit sideways on that analogy. And then if you could just bring me back to, where were we going with that, Mike?
I think we were
Oh,
talking.
enabling.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yes,
lost you there
enabling.
for a minute. Yeah, so enabling is a very tough thing. It's another one of these words that is a little bit hard to understand, because enabling can be a very good thing. My son just went away to college yesterday. He's about an hour away, and got down there. Everything was fine, and he calls up and says, "Dad, my car just died." And I'm like, "What?" So my wife and I, we drive all the way down there, end up changing out his battery, give him a new battery. So we're enabling him to function. We're helping him. We're aiding him in doing what he's doing, which is going to college and getting ready to better his life. Enabling can be a really good thing. Enabling can be a very harmful thing too. The extreme example that I've always used is the gentleman who comes home late at night, so intoxicated, he vomits all over the place. He's in a blackout. The wife, being the good wife, cleans him up, puts him to bed. He wakes up the next day and says, "What are you upset about? Everything was fine." He just totally doesn't remember that. But the wife has enabled that by hiding the consequences, by removing what we call hitting the bottom.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great illustration. And I've never thought about the positive side of
Mhm,
enabling,
mhm.
but that makes a lot of sense. And I think that helps to clarify what that term means. And like in the fire service, in the police service, there's a lot of, you know, we go out and have a good time together, but within the group, there can be like one or two people who maybe drink a little more than the rest. Maybe you look out for that person. You make sure they get home safely, and then you know going back to the analogy of the frog and the temperature going up 1 degree. Fast forward a year or two, and now
Yeah.
maybe that person's missing shifts. They're calling in sick. They're coming to work hungover, and and you know maybe we're still kind of covering and just feeding into this when So there hasn't been a rock bottom moment yet to change that.
That's really said, well said, Mike. That idea of getting somebody home safe, right? If you're out celebrating as a group and you're trying to decompress, and someone's clearly not in a place to drive or whatever, getting them home, enabling them to get home is a great thing. That's a really, really good thing, without realizing that it has that other side of potentially making the drinking worse for that person. Many times I will hear stories of persons who are pulled over for DWI. And at the scene where they're clearly intoxicated in a bad place, the police officer lets them go because it's a nephew of the chief, or, it's one of these things where, boy, this is one of our own, let's say, so we want to protect him, not realizing, to me as a counselor, when I'm sitting with that person and I'm thinking, if only that police officer had arrested, it would have been such a good thing. You don't think of arresting somebody as being a good thing. It can be a very, very good thing. A lot of the works that I've done is in the national drug court systems. And in the drug courts, we use that leverage, if you will, to make sure that somebody follows through. Because when you get pulled over, your heart's beating and the adrenaline's going. You're like, oh my God, my life is ruined. My life is ruined. At that very moment, the person's hitting a bottom, and they're now ready for what we call the stages of change, and they're ready to make a change. However, if the officer says, hey, you're a good guy, I've known you my whole life, just drive slow, I'll follow you home, make sure you get home safe. Again, that's a good thing. However, that might be enabling that person now to say, oh, hey, he's such a good officer. Next time I do it again, I can get off this time, rather than thinking I could run somebody over or have those negative sides to it, right? So
Right.
it's a very complicated thing. People are complicated. The more I learn about psychology, the more I love it, because we are so darn complicated. Sometimes we think we're doing something really good for somebody. A lot of parents will tell me, I don't want my son arrested. He stole our credit card and put all this money on it, but we're not going to press charges because we don't want him to have a record. And they don't realize that's doing more harm than good, because the legal system, it's been such a boon for us. I mean, to help people, we need to cooperate with police. We need to have the judges on board. We need to, it's that idea of wraparound, the wraparound
Yes.
all the way around a person, not just, they have this thing now with the opiates where instead of arresting somebody with a needle in their arm, you just say, hey, let me get you into treatment. Okay, which is great, but
Right.
not really, because then again, that person's at the bottom. Within 5-10 minutes, sometimes they're like, there's no charges, and they're right back out the door again. So they don't have that
Yeah.
follow through, that stick to. I use another idea of the roller coaster. The roller coaster is, I'm having fun, 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 whether it's drinking. Let's keep it with drinking. It's enjoyable, we all do it, drinking, drinking, good time, good time, good time. And then whoosh, something bad happens, whether it's I'm pulled over or whatever that bad thing is. We all have these crisis moments. We've all been through them. And at that bottom, this is where we're ready to change. But the problem is we come up sometimes very quickly if there's not a consequence, and we're right back to, this time I can control it. This time I won't go so far. This time will be different, which is fine if it is. But for a lot of folks, it's fun, 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 and another bottom. And then fun, and then I'll have the wives and the family members saying, Tim, that's it exactly. We go through all these times and he says, I'm going to change. I'm going to get some help. I'm going to do something. And then they're right back at it again. Not because they're bad people. That's another part of this conversation.
Right.
Alcohol can have these effects on us, and it doesn't turn us into bad people. However, it can develop into a disorder. And like other disorders like cancer, diabetes, doesn't mean that we're bad people. It just means that we are like that Cadillac. That Cadillac's not bad. It just needs new brakes. We can
Right.
be like that too. We're not bad people, but we can develop this illness. And the illness can be the key word is progressive, slowly developing, just like that frog, 1 degree, 1 degree, slowly developing into something that is um, very difficult to control. I'm laughing because there's a lot of these street sayings that they're so wise, but they're a little bit off color. One of them is thinking that you maybe have a problem with drinking, and then saying, you know what, I'm just gonna stop. I'm just gonna fix it myself is like, excuse the pun here and the wording, but it's like taking a box of X-Lax and saying, I'm not gonna sit on the crapper. Good luck with that. Good luck. And this is straight from some of those like AA meetings. You know, there's a
Yeah.
tradition in AA, there's a culture in AA. And if your audience doesn't know anything about these 12-step programs, I strongly encourage, I always say to people, look, I don't care if you've never had a drop of alcohol, check out an AA meeting because they're filled with really good people. They have a lot of wisdom behind it. This is something that has been worked and worked and reworked since the 1930s. They got some really, really good stuff there. Now, that being
Yeah.
said, there's always the bad side too, that's the true of everything. But there's really good stuff that can come out of the 12-step programs like Alcoholics Anonymous. And again, don't let that first word fool you. Alcoholic is so misunderstood. Just drop whatever preconceptions you have about that, because
Yeah.
you only know that little part of the thermometer.
Right. That's so helpful. Oh, yeah. I feel like I'm not a big fan of labels. I never have been. And because those labels can literally bind us and prevent people from getting help or from, giving themselves the grace to go out and get help. And I see it a lot in my practice as well. And it's funny in my practice, serving mostly first responders, as you could imagine, people come in with a lot of different kinds of issues, family dynamics, um, self-care, sleep schedule. It's very, very rare, though, that somebody will come in and talk to me about alcohol use. It might it might come out as kind of like a joke or an offhand comment, but for somebody to come in and say, this is the reason I'm here, it hardly ever happens. And so I'm glad that we're talking about this and shining a bright light on it because, as you said so well, Tim, if we move away from the labels and just focus on the things we're dealing with, um, there's help out there, and maybe that's something we can talk about. If I'm the person watching right now and I really think maybe I've got to do something about this issue, what steps can I take? Like, where does this begin?
Awesome. Yeah, really, really good question. So it's a tougher answer. When we have medical problems, and I'm talking about not related to alcohol, I'm just talking about a
Okay.
broken arm or whatever. We really have that nailed down to a science, and we're so good at. We have X-ray machines, we have blood tests, we have all of this amazing stuff that really. 9 out of 10 people are served very well, probably 9.9 out of 10. You go in, you're taken care of. Here's your free medication, sample, or here's a prescription. Here's some sutures. Done. First responders are great with taking care of things like that as well. However, when it comes to things like alcohol or drugs or gambling or sex or these other things that are not directly medically treatable, well, I shouldn't even say treatable, but not served that way, let's say traditionally, it's not the same. We have, as I've talked about, inpatient units, we have outpatient units, we have private practitioners like yourself and like me, where we do this kind of work, but we don't have X-ray machines and we don't have really blood tests. I mean, we have things like urine analysis, which can be very helpful. And I don't want to get too much into that because that's a whole other conversation. But the point is, it's much more of a gray area. So I like to say to people, look, getting help with alcohol or something similar is difficult because it's like going to a restaurant. Restaurants they range from horrible to amazing and everywhere in between. As a general rule of thumb, you don't go to McDonald's looking for a world-class chef. You go someplace else. You go to the more expensive places. But you can't do that with this field. It's hard to know what's the McDonald's of getting help and what is the I don't know, the fancy restaurant of where's the good place to go. For years I've advocated for a while, but then I gave that up because it was a difficult task of having some way to know where's a good place to go. How do you do this? You can't go. I was thinking about this, earlier today, that you can't go to your neighbor or your friends or your family and say, hey, where'd you go to get your alcohol treatment? How did that work for you? You
Right.
can't do that because of that darn stigma. Now, it's certainly great. Hey, where do you go for a dentist? We're just, oh yeah, my dentist is over here. Where'd you go for cancer care? Over here. Where did you go for alcohol and drug treatment? It's just that
Right.
shock. We still have that horrible taboo, to talk about that. Therefore, it makes a problem. Who knows who's good and who knows who's not good? So that being said, to answer your question, I would suggest that a good place to start is maybe a twofold approach. The one is just check out a self-help meeting. I'm telling you, many people, when I say this to them, almost across the board, they say, no, 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 no. I don't want to do that. I don't want to for that same reason, because it's taboo. You don't want to go into a room and say, hey, I'm Tim. I got a problem with alcohol. Nobody wants to do that. However, everyone else there is in the same boat, so you don't have the taboo. It's just hard going in that first time. Once you get there, I have been told so many times by so many wonderful patients, Tim, it was amazing. I should have done that sooner. They were so warm. The first thing you get is a cup of coffee walking in, and and if you want to be left alone, they'll leave you alone. And but if you want to be talked to, they talk. It's so wonderful. And you go to like a speaker meeting, because each AA meeting is different. A speaker meeting is where you just go and sit and you listen to somebody else, and that can be less invasive. And COVID has done some really good things for us too. Look at the way you and I are talking right now, right? You can go to AA just like this. You can go and you can turn your camera off. I won't turn mine off, but you can do that and go in anonymously. I always say to people, say you're Joe from Idaho, use a different name. Nobody's going to know who you are. But check it out. And that's so non-threatening. It's so easy to do with a computer nowadays. And it's free. That's another thing that's good about that. On the other side, I would encourage a person to reach out to a professional. My roof had a leak when I first moved into this home, and drip, 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 drip. So I thought, I need a new roof, right? Logical thing, I would think. I'm not a roofer. So I called in and got 3 estimates. I did my due diligence. The first guy said, yep, need a new roof. Here's your quote. Next guy said that. The third guy said, Tim, you don't need a new roof. I can fix this in like 5 minutes. You need better ventilation. I didn't know you had to ventilate a roof. I'm not a roofer. I'm not a construction. I had no idea. And he fixed it very simply, saved me tens of thousands of dollars. The point is, I can do that, and so can a good professional with someone who is drinking maybe a little bit more than they should. A good professional can show you things that you never would have thought that common sense would have brought you to. And then if you try somebody and they're not so good, feel free to drop them. I always tell my patients, look, if I'm not fitting for you, I'm not going to be angry at you. I'll help you find somebody else, or you can there's no harm, no foul in doing that. So it's just a little bit easier, I think, to do the AA thing. And by the way, AA is not the only game in town. AA, again, to use my prop, is in the middle. AA is centered. And what that means is that way over on this side, we have meetings that are different, and way over on this side. On this side, we have meetings that are for persons who really don't want to hear anything about God or Jesus. Like, really, I don't believe in that. I'm not Christian. I don't want anything to do with God. I don't want to hear it from AA, because there can be a spiritual tone. AA is very spiritual, and it's supposed to be non-denominational. It usually is, but some people don't want that. So on this end, we have things like SMART recovery and SOS. It's a little bit more science-based, and it's less huggy, touchy-feely, and no prayer. And then on the other side, we have persons, probably more on this side in my experience, that say, look, I don't want just AA where I believe in a higher power. I want Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. So there's meetings on that side, like Reformers Unanimous, Set Free, Celebrate Recovery, that fit more for Christians. And then there's also Buddhist meetings on that side, and other ones that pop up too. So that's kind of an overview of where to go to get help. And I would encourage anyone that wants to call me anytime. I'll just like we're doing here, I'll chat with somebody. I'll kind of give you some advice if you want it, some pointers. And I get a lot of calls from wives. I get a lot of calls for my son, my daughter, my husband. family members. Family is a really big piece of this that is forgotten. We can have a lot of family that wants answers and just doesn't know what to do. Maybe one of your listeners has a nephew or a niece or a son or their spouse that may be on the edge of going to the casino too often, or those kind of things. So feel free to contact me at any point on those issues.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that, Tim. I just learned so much, and I love the visual with the thermometer. When I think about treatment, the first thing that comes to mind is Alcoholics Anonymous. I think that's been kind of the most recognized benchmark. And I have heard many people say, I don't really want to go the spiritual route. I don't want somebody preaching to me, if that's the conception that they have, or misconception. But knowing there are other options, knowing they can reach out and talk to you and connect and get pointed in the right direction is huge.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times it's just that first step. It's so scary. The clinic where I'm working out of in Athens has a really wonderful program for people that don't have any insurance. So it's a community-based clinic, and people with, they can go there for detox to a walk-in crisis center. It's open 24/7. And they go there, and rather than being met by a clinician like myself or somebody, with a clipboard or a medical model, they're met with a peer, and they match the peers to the people who come in. So say I'm going in for alcohol detox, very likely the first person they're going to meet is somebody who's been there, done that. Mm-hmm. And they do an amazing job. So that's the first person you meet on the way in. It's the last person you see on your way out. And the biggest key is social supports, to try and connect people with other folks in a similar journey. And as you said so well, getting family involved. That's a critical component. I often say to firefighters and police and EMS, when you signed up for this job, you basically signed your whole family up for it, because everybody's going to sacrifice. They're going to work around your schedule. It can take a toll, and having that support and having those difficult conversations, especially around things like alcohol, can be the factor. They can be the thing that brings you out of it and gets you to help.
You just reminded me, Mike, about how often it is that someone will come to me and say, look, I have somebody who is in need of help, who struggles, but they just won't go. They just refuse no matter what I do. And then you'll hear these catchphrases, and these really hurt me. The catchphrase is like, a person will not get better unless they want to get better. Oh, that really turns my stomach, because there is some truth in that, but it is not a be all end all, and it is not to be used across the board. You will hear some of these things like in Al-Anon. Al-Anon, people don't always understand there's a difference between Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon. Al-Anon is more for the family members. It is for someone who has a loved one who is drinking too much. And in Al-Anon, you will hear these ideas of just let go, because there's nothing you can do. Just take care of you. And again, that is good advice, to take care of you. Yes, take care of you. But there's a lot of things that we can do. That's kind of the main specialty that I have now, is working with folks who refuse treatment, or working with folks who have gone to 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 inpatients and they're still abusing alcohol or drugs. That's my specialty. And there are many people will come to me and say, we've done everything, there's nothing that can be done. And I'll find something that can be done. And I hear that feedback all the time, because there are different approaches out there. This is one of the things that make me passionate about my work, is that we still have so much to do to get a good science around how to help people related to substances and related to balancing out what the culture teaches us, and the idea of something that changes my chemistry in my brain. And there's a lot of innovations out there. There's a lot of new things that can be tapped into that many people, as I told you about that thermometer on the side, most people have never heard of anything other than AA. Just like you said, everybody knows AA, but lots of people don't know that there's options. I'm surprised at how many people don't understand that. And you don't want to be in the wrong place, because again, I've heard so many people say, I hate AA. I tried it. It doesn't work. I can't stand AA. And not just because of religious reasons. There's other things going on there. And it is very related, as you said, to the family. When you sign up to drink too much, you're signing up your whole family. That's also a very, very similar thing. If you are going to the casino a lot and winning, well, good for you. Um, but if your luck turns the other way and you keep going, your whole family suffers. And then there's all that stigma that comes down on them as well too. It's complicated. There's so much to this field. There's so much to be misunderstood. It's a lot like COVID, especially when COVID first came out.
Yeah.
When COVID first hit me, I was having Lysol and Clorox, and I was rubbing down everything, that came in the house, and we had masks on and gloves, and because we just didn't know, we just had no idea of how to handle it, and we still don't to some extent. Who knows what Delta is going to do to us right now? And in a way, the field of alcohol, drug use, those kind of things is very similar, because there's a lot of unknowns, and there's so many misunderstandings, so many ideas about how, here's a really nice one. You would never put somebody with diabetes or cancer in jail. Why would you put somebody with drug or alcohol use in jail? It's not the same. It's not the same, because when you have cancer, you are usually motivated to get better. But if I'm drinking too much, I'm not so motivated to get better. I'm more motivated to control my drinking. I'm more motivated to be a normal drinker. I'm motivated to get people off my back and let me use my coma cocktail because it works, or I think it works. So it's a motivation thing, and it's very different than any other disease. And jail and the legal system can be so helpful. I'm not an advocate of putting people in jail. Don't get me wrong. I don't like that at all. But if there's that threat that either you get better or you go to jail, it can be highly effective. Whereas without that threat, that's where people say, there's nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do. He's going to kill himself drinking.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I'm so glad you brought it up, because in my line of work, we have seen the success of treatment and accountability court.
Mm-hmm.
So what that looks like for people that aren't familiar, there are legal consequences to some of the behaviors we're talking about. And as part of the crisis unit, I encounter people who are in crisis. Sometimes substances are involved. And my main mission is to get people help. The vast majority of the time, that's voluntary. People say, yeah, I'm done. I need something to change. I'll go to the hospital with you and let's start the process.
Mm-hmm.
And that is wonderful. But there are other times where something has occurred. Maybe the person has trespassed on a property. Maybe they've damaged something. And then what may happen is there's charges. And if we have a pattern of substances, the people can go into treatment and accountability court, and then the legal system kind of holds them accountable, right? And they get the support they need, but they also are held accountable. So there are maybe urinalysis is involved, maybe scheduled meetings, treatment, sharing of information so that the court can monitor and make sure they're going to meetings and doing what they should do. And I feel like it's a really great system. Here in Athens, we have periodically they have a night where they celebrate people's graduation from treatment and accountability court. Mm-hmm. And it's just profound. I went to one, and the judge brought in cake, and he had diplomas and handed them out and personally congratulated each and every person for getting through that program. It can take a couple years for some people to get through that. It's not easy. I'm not trying to make it sound like a vacation. Yeah. But the people that come out the other side of that they're just transformed. It's just an amazing thing to see somebody that, maybe I encountered under a bridge or in the street, and they were at the rock bottom, and here that person is not only graduating and getting their life back, but oftentimes they become the peer counselors that reach back and help the next person get through something similar.
Many times people will ask me, why do you do this work? How did you get into it? And why? Because it can be, from their perspective, those people, how would you want to work with those? They're robbing places all the time, et cetera. But as you just pointed out, there are some just amazing, beautiful stories of people who turn their lives around and really excel and flourish. And it is just so profound. And it really is what keeps me going, because people really are wonderful. And this idea about it's us versus them is really a fallacy, because this happens to anybody, anywhere, anytime. And it's not an us versus them. And it's not, that they're criminals, that drug addicts are this. That stereotype again is so much there. And it's if you're somebody that's going through it, I can tell you there is some really good that can come out of it. You get so much freedom, problem solved. And like you said, with that accountability in the treatment court, it's very much like the sort of the opposite of what we want to do. We want to say, well, look, I'm a man, I can figure this out myself.
Mhm.
But if you can't figure it out yourself, it is so helpful to have that old idea of two heads are better than one, whether it's
Right.
a judge on your side, or it is your doctor. Sometimes it's simply as just talking to your own doctor about it. And you'd be surprised how many people will say, hey, me too. I've been through this. And you've been, yes, I've been through it as well. I'm an alcoholic in recovery. I'm an addict in recovery. I have a little over 10 years now myself. And we were always trained in this field to not really talk about that, because it should be something that you don't want your patients to pick up on and use against you, or to align too much with you. But now we are more encouraging people to be more honest and to break the stigma. And a lot of my patients will say, you? And I'll say, yeah, it happens to anybody. But I can tell you the rewards are just amazing. I just love my sobriety. I love being who I am, and things only get better and better. Maybe at first it's tough, but it's well worth it. It's like an investment. You got to put some out there at first, and then you reap the rewards later on. So I think we
Wow.
covered a lot of topics today, Mike. Is there anything else on your radar, sir?
Well, no, I think we did a fantastic job, Tim, and I can't tell you how moved I am by your story. I wasn't aware of that. It takes a lot of courage to share that, and I know that that piece right there, somebody listening is going to say, "Yeah, I'm inspired. I need to take that first step."
I hope so. I hope so. I sincerely do.
Me too. I appreciate what you do. I really can't thank you enough for being here. And I hope that we can do this again and build on it, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done. A lot of people are hurting, especially right now. And this is the stuff that gives me hope that, we're really making a difference.
All right. Thank you so much for the invitation, Mike. It was a pleasure talking with you. And if I could be of any service, you or anybody else, reach out anytime.
Likewise. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye now.